Hi everyone, and welcome to SurrealDB stream number 23. Nice to see you all. My name's Lizzie Holmes. I'm head of operations here at SurrealDB, and today we have a super exciting stream. You may have all seen that on Tuesday we announced the launch of Surrealist 2.0. all over our socials. So today we are going to be diving into that with the creator of Surrealist, Julian, also known, of course, as Jules on Discord, and Misha de Vries as well. Just while we're joining, do let us know, to all of you watching, have you used Surrealist? Are you brand new to SurrealDB? We would love to hear from you, and of course, where you're joining in from today. And we're going to get going in a minute. Hello everybody. Hello Joseph. Hello Bo. Nice to see you. Hi Kaino. Nice to meet you too. Harsh, great to see you. Yeah, do let us know. How long have you been using Surreal? Particularly, have you been a community member using Surrealist? We really want to hear. Joining from LA, amazing. So just as a reminder, as with all of our SurrealDB streams, please do pop any questions that you have into the chat at any time. Misha and Julian have got a really fantastic stream for us today, but they will be answering your questions throughout the stream. So do make sure you pop those in. So as a reminder, Julian is going to be diving into this a lot more, but Julian joined us directly from the community, and Misha's going to be talking to him about that in a moment. We're going to be running through Surrealist and also diving into kind of a few hidden tips and tricks as well. Hello, joining from Trinidad and Tobago. Amazing, we're a properly international call today. So welcome to the stage, Julian and Misha, and can't wait for this stream.
Hello, everyone. Hey, yeah, as Lizzie said, it's a pretty international stream today from all around the globe. That's amazing. Hey, yeah. So I guess we'll just dive right in. So Julian, maybe do you want to introduce yourself? Where you're coming from, and
yeah, of course. Right. So I'm Julian. I've only recently joined Surreal. Some of you may know me as the person who made Surrealist, which has started over a year ago by now. Although as of now, Surrealist is part of SurrealDB, and I'm excited to continue working on it.
that's amazing. And what have you been doing before Surreal?
Yeah, so before joining Surreal, I actually ended up using Surreal in production as well. I actually came across SurrealDB in September of 22, I think it was. It was the Fireship video that I watched. I was looking for a database at the time that kind of solved a couple of problems I was running into. The biggest one was the flexibility of a schema. So I came from I originally came from Firebase, which had pretty much no schema. After that, I migrated my project to Postgres, which had a pretty rigid schema. So I ended up settling on Surreal since it had the option of schemaless and schemaful, plus a lot of functionality I was used to from Postgres, as well as functionality from Firebase. So I really kind of did everything that I wanted. I didn't actually start using it until about December of that year, which is also when I started working on Surrealist.
Yeah, that's amazing. And because you invented Surrealist basically for your colleagues to basically have a tool to interface with SurrealDB, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Like I said, we came from Firebase, so we're used to having the Firebase console, although it's not that powerful. But I still needed a way to interact with the database that was more than just the CLI, because it needed to be used by non-technical people as well. So from the start, I had the intention of building Surrealist to actually be useful for not just technical people, but also people that might not know queries and might not understand every aspect of the database. So I've always been focused on making it very user-friendly as well.
Because that's where it started with just a query view, if I remember correctly, and it just over last year, it's basically rolled out to not just query, but also Explorer, Designer, Communication, and just basically a whole suite of tools, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, yeah, like you said, the first version was essentially just a query view. So you just had a left section where you enter a query, a right section where you see the results, and a button to send the query. That was about it. It was pretty simple, but it worked quite well. And because of new challenges I had, and I basically needed to keep expanding it because I mean the first new feature added that was not the query view was actually the Explorer view that came quite early on in development, because I'd often find myself trying to look at data, but I have to write these queries every time. It got a bit cumbersome, so I figured, why can't we just click on the table and just see everything, So that's where the idea of the Explorer view came from, and that ended up evolving into this idea of having all these different kinds of views, which ultimately allow you to access SerialDB in a different way.
Yeah, that's really cool. And from that, I guess more and more views evolved. You joined in February now, and we've been working hard on improving Surrealist, adding more views, making it more robust, making it faster, adding new really cool, neat features. I mean, I was just wondering, you started in Golang, right? How's that, and how did you evolve from there?
Right. So when I initially wanted to make Surrealist, I knew pretty much from the start that I wanted to go with the web technology. At the time, I mean, Electron has historically always been the biggest, but I'm not a fan of the the bloat that it ships with. So I started looking for alternatives. I actually did come across Tori at the time, but I didn't know any Rust. So I got kind of freaked out and ended up going with Golang, which also had a framework called Wales, which actually, I mean, it works quite well. It's pretty similar to Tauri, actually. The problem, though, was that at some point, which was when I wanted to make the designer view, I actually needed to parse the strings returned from info4db in order to extract information like the permissions, fields, everything, right? I started with the regex, but it didn't work. It didn't work well at all. So I had the idea of, could I not use the Rust SDK for SerialDB to essentially parse these strings and then extract information out of it? So that was actually the main reason why I ended up switching from Golang to Rust and learning Rust in the process. So I ended up building the designer view. Although since then, I've actually made use of that technique a lot more. So the authentication view, for example, makes use of it for the sign up and sign in queries for the scopes. And it's also used in a couple other places now. But at the time, that was a massive rewrite because I had to take the entire back end of Surrealist and kind of just redo it in a language that I wasn't familiar at all. So, but I mean, it ended up working out well. So
yeah, you did it, and it just worked great from that point on. So that's amazing. And I think that's also the point where you started to get a bit of community adoption, right? Where the stars started to pick up. How was that? Because you went from like just maybe 100 stars to like 700 stars. That's a big jump, I think. But
absolutely, yeah. So the first release of Surrealist was in December of 22, right? It didn't. I mean, initially I posted in the Discord, but it didn't get that much attention. There were some other projects out there doing something similar, so it wasn't all that interesting. It was only really when I started adding in the additional views that it started gaining traction.
Really, the UI part of it.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Absolutely, yes. A lot of the features added in the first few months were actually community suggestions, because there were a lot of ways I could easily make Surrealist a lot more powerful than it was. Like I said, it was just a query viewer, essentially. It basically just kept growing faster and faster. At some point, I noticed that even members of SerialDB were using it as well. That was pretty cool as well. Wasn't expecting that because it just started as a small project for my colleagues mostly. But it just kept growing and growing. And I mean, it reached a significant size until now it's become official, of course.
Yeah, it's amazing. Hey, so I'm thinking maybe we just jump into Surrealist, maybe walk through the views that have already been there, that we've improved, and some of the views that were added in this last release. So to start off with the query view, it's a familiar look, I think. But let me see. So it's the oldest part of Surrealist. As we said, it's basically the first view that we had. Queries are now in the sidebar. So previously there were tabs, right? I believe above the query view.
Yeah, so originally we had tabs above the queries because they were added in, quite late. You couldn't order them, but you could rename them. And since then, I've essentially just taken them, given them more space, made them easier to work with.
Yeah, and I think it's a significant improvement, and it's a recurring part of the UI now. Basically, a sidebar in every view, I believe. So that makes it easier to navigate. And I mean, general spring cleaning. You can now easily add new queries. Some of the buttons like saving queries or changing the response layout has moved. Previously, I think that it was query on the left and results on the right. Was that correct?
Yeah, it was like vertically positioned, right? So we've taken it and kind of rotated it so the query is now on the top and the results at the bottom. Because we found that you often end up with pretty long queries and either had to like wrap them or scroll, and it wasn't very intuitive. So by placing it like this, we end up having a lot more space for queries.
Yeah, I think I think Windows users love the vertical scroll. So yeah, that's great improvement. Absolutely. So yeah, it works like before. We can still let's create a test record. It still works like before. We have the table view. We have individual responses. So if we have, let's say, two records, two queries, we can see that we still have the sort of the individual views as well. We still have the combined view, as we all know and love it. And another big change here, which I see pop up in the chat, is CodeMirror and some of the shortcuts that have been changed. Could you maybe talk a bit about that?
Yes, of course. So historically, we've always used Monaco Editor. It worked quite well, but it had a couple issues. The main one was performance. So there's a couple places where we wanted to display queries, for example, in the query history or the saved queries, but we couldn't highlight them without turning each of them into a whole editor, which was too heavy for Monaco to handle. Additionally, it caused a pretty big bundle size, and it had issues with fitting it into the page. You couldn't make it auto size. It was pretty difficult to work with. So I decided to essentially just replace Monaco entirely with CodeMirror, which took a lot of effort because first we had to make it look similar, but most importantly, we actually had to write an entire laser grammar from scratch. So this allowed us to highlight SurrealQL within CodeMirror. It does allow us to do a lot more than we were able to do with Monaco before. Additionally, it also means that we can now display queries highlighted in the query history and the saved queries. Each of them is actually very lightweight CodeMirror editor, and that just wasn't possible before.
Yeah, and another cool thing with the new grammar is that we can positionally highlight keywords. So what you may notice, previously user is a keyword in SurrealQL. Previously, this would be highlighted as well, which you can actually see in VS Code still today. But with CodeMirror, we can positionally highlight keywords based on the query that you've inputted, making this now just an ident instead of a token, which is I think it's pretty cool. All right, so moving on to, and actually let me just address the last comment. Some keyword shortcuts are missing. Yes, we are working in the future to maybe add some of these shortcuts back, and there's also, I think, a timeline for adding mappable keyboard shortcuts, right?
Yeah, that's right, absolutely.
So that will make it a lot easier to customize it to your liking. All right, so let's move on to the Explorer view, and I think this is pretty much the same as in the old release. Can you are there any differences or improvements or?
Yeah, there's a couple small improvements. It is still mostly the same as before. I mean, it worked quite well, so I didn't see a lot of reason to make big changes. You're still able to list out the tables, inspect all fields and columns. You can still filter as well by pressing the button in the top. Filter down your records, really useful. One of the big changes here, which actually isn't specifically in the Explorer, but it's the fact that the editor that opens when you click a row in the Explorer is now actually global. So if you execute a query in the query view and then switch to table rendering mode, you can actually press any record in there and it will open the inspector just like you did before in the Explorer view. So we're still looking at ways to implement this further, make it usable in even more places. But it means that you can actually edit records very fast from all over Surrealist.
There we go, just updated. That's really cool. And I don't believe this record has, actually it does. So look, we actually have a relation here as well. So you can basically browse through all the different edge records we have as well with graph relations. All right, let's move on to the designer view in that case. There we go. It was actually a fun bug today, which we fixed. If you track like that, it would do some funny stuff. Yeah, the designer view. Can you tell something about the designer view? Is there anything changed or?
Yeah, so the designer view fundamentally works the same, but I gave it pretty much a complete overhaul. So just some history on the designer view, right? Before, and I'm talking about I think it was half a year ago, initially I added the designer view and a visualizer view. So the visualizer basically had the graph and the designer just had the editing functionality. At some point I'm going to merge them together because it just makes sense that you can kind of map out and edit and just modify your schema in a single place, which is why the designer view is so powerful right now. So I've actually ended up revamping the diagram that renders. It uses a new layout algorithm. It looks a lot better. We had issues before where you had a lot of fields and you needed to toggle them. It was a bit difficult to work with. It also resulted in some, just not the nicest layout. But now with a new layout algorithm, it will usually create a very nice looking layout of your schema. So you can just press any table in here, open the drawer, and edit any part of the table directly in Surrealist. I've updated it as well with some new features, such as read-only properties on fields, and generally just made it work a little better as well. I'm still planning to improve this field going forward because there's obviously a lot more that we're going to add here at SurrealDB. So I'm going to overhaul it in the future, add more functionality to it, give it more space. But for now, it works really well. Still very similar to how it was before. And it's just a really nice way to modify your schema.
That's really cool. It's really cool. So in that case, for the final view, authentication view, is there anything interesting to be said here about any features or?
So the authentication view is essentially the same as it was before. It's very simple right now. You can manage your root, namespace, and database users, as well as modify your scopes. The nice thing about scopes now is that the sign up and sign in fields actually have highlighting within them. So the queries you put in are fully highlighted, essentially efficient small editors on their own, making it even nicer to work with scopes.
There we go, you can see that. It's really nice. Okay, let's see. In the meantime, maybe we can go through some of the questions that we've had in the chat. So I see Arman Radon here. Record links in design view are cool, but they only work with record type and not option record.
Yeah, this is definitely a field we want to research further. Right now, indeed, it only shows you relations between tables if they actually have record edges, right? There's actually a new way of defining these that we introduced recently. If you now go to the designer view and open the drawer, you can actually set the table type to relation, after which you can add the input and output tables. This, going forward, will be the main way of defining your relations, and these are also guaranteed to render within the designer view. Currently, if you have fields with record IDs in them, they're not currently rendered with relations. This is something I'm still looking into.
Yeah, that's cool. And I see some question from MVX and Caniona. Also, will there be any Arch Linux builds and WinGets? I mean, I think for the moment, we will be distributing the installers and executables via GitHub releases, but we will absolutely look into ways of improving this and making it more broader available in the future. Let's see. I installed Postgres yesterday once I saw Release 2. That's really amazing. That's really cool. Keep it going, and let us know if there's any feedback that you have, and we'll absolutely have a look at that. Let's see. What's the tech stack used in Surrealist? For the moment, we have Tauri, and it's mostly React, right? We have some custom. We have new updated Wasm crate and a new QL package, which we'll maybe touch upon in a little bit as well. We've basically revamped the JS library a bit to make Surrealist work even more performant and even better. So that's really cool. All right, let's go on to some of the new views that we have in Surrealist, which is the functions view. I'm really excited about this one. So in Surrealist 2.0, we've added a functions view where you can list any existing functions, obviously. You can edit them. So that's maybe ship one. You can save it. You can add arguments. Let's say test, which is a number. There we go. And you can change the permissions for the function.
I think we may have lost Misha there.
It looks like he's dived out. He'll be logging back in, Julian, just while we wait for him to reload, just kind of hopping in to ask how it has been joining, like going from a community member into a member of the team.
Yeah, I mean, that's been crazy on its own. I mean, I've known SurrealDB since September of 22, so that's quite a long while now. I've been following along with development. I've seen, a lot of people getting hired over that past year. But I've only joined since February, so I actually knew a lot about Surreal and had a lot of actual work production experience using it. So joining has actually been quite interesting because I can use a lot of my prior experience to view things from a slightly different angle. It's been really fun. It's been awesome.
One question before Misha dives back into the code as well, which we were talking about, is how quickly you had to learn Rust in order to do this. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, when I was initially making Surrealist, I was considering Rust. I looked a bit into it, but I don't know. It just seemed too much effort. I just stuck with Go. It was a lot easier at the time. But when I ran into the designer view limitation, I couldn't just not do it anymore. I just thought, you know what, I'm going to have to learn it. I'm going to have to do it. So I decided to just go for it, spend one afternoon learning the fundamentals, and I just started rewriting everything. So it was quite the challenge. One of the hardest things to do was definitely the database serving. So the button you press to launch a local database, because it involved multi-threading, locks, executing commands. It was pretty intense, but I got there in the end, so that was nice.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. Okay, I think we're diving back in, aren't we, Misha?
I hope my connection won't drop this time. It dropped twice, actually. Crazy. Hey, anyways, so I was saying, we can set variables, edit permissions, edit the function content, add any comments, and basically save it. We can also add a new function, which basically works very similarly to how existing functions work. And so you can add a body basically save the function. And yeah, is there any comment you want to add there, Julian, about the function scheme?
Well, I mean, you described it quite well. It's pretty simple. Ultimately, you can manage, edit, create functions, but it provides a very nice way of working with it, so you don't have to just rely on queries. Especially the ability to easily input a permission, just press full permission, no permission. It's just quite nice to work with. Additionally, there are buttons to download it and easily delete it as well. So it's a pretty simple view, but it does exactly what it needs to do.
Yeah, that's really cool. And we also have a new models view. I couldn't get it working in time, unfortunately, for the stream, so we'll have to show that another time. But yeah, you'll be able to basically manage your models. It's like add comments and is that correct? Actually.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's slightly limited now as we're still working on the SerilML functionality in SerilDB. But currently, you can use it to easily upload SerilML files. You don't have to do any curl commands or anything anymore. You can just hit the upload button and just select a file. That's simple. It'll list out your models, their versions, and that's about what you can do right now. But we're definitely looking to expand this view in the future as well.
That's pretty cool. And I see a comment from Kai Noah in the meantime. Yes, actually, comments are, I think, a feature since beta 11, if I'm not mistaken. So on any resource that you define, whether that be a function or maybe a table, you can add a comment like so, and it's basically a string, and you can add in whatever you want, and it will persist it to the database. And this is something that we probably can improve on showing in SerilList as well. But it's a nice way to add a comment to maybe why you added resource or why something works the way it works. And everyone that has access to the schema can see that.
Yeah, so one nice thing to add as well there is comments are actually also supporting the authentication view. So as I was making it, I haven't gone around to adding comments to the designer yet. That's something I do plan on implementing. In the authentication view, you can already put comments on users.
Yep, there we go, saved. Ooh, that's a big comment icon. We'll get that patched. Anyways, for the last few, for API docs, which is possibly my favorite, is the API docs view. It's actually so it's based on your database schema that you have. You can get documentation on how certain things work in your database, how you can query against your database. You can see here, if we go to the tables, we have an artist table, which is in our schema, an average product review, and we get customized queries based on that schema, which is just insanely cool. Julian, what can you tell us about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome, isn't it? You get interactive API documentation directly in SerilList now. The cool thing is you can select which language you want to use.
Yeah.
You can do that in the top right or in the introduction article as well. We currently only support a couple of languages, but we're definitely looking at expanding these as well going forward. We're also going to be keeping this up to date with new features in SerilDB as well. So this is going to be the best place to learn about the API.
Yeah, this is it's such a cool feature. I really love this one. All right, let's see. And well, yeah, for the future, I mean, I think you mentioned this Tuesday as well. We want this sidebar just completely filled up with more workflows. So there's much to be added, like maybe indexes and other resources to manage in the database. And I mean, suggestions are always welcome. So if you have any idea of workflows to add into SerilList, please hop over to our SerilList repository, which is github.com/SerilDB/SerilList, and open a feature request there. And we can discuss it and make it happen. All right. So a tour of the hidden gems, some of the cool newly added features into SerilList. Where should we start? I mean, there's so many. First of all, I kind of did this really fast in the beginning of the stream. But if you're in the sandbox, you can now load in a data set. So for example, the SerilDeal, which our colleague Alexander has created. which is also available from the documentation. You can just click the button and it's loaded in. Now in our Explorer, we have a bunch of tables to explore, in Designer, and in Authentication View, which is where all the data for the stream also comes from. And it's just such an easy way to get started. Either if you're on the web or if you're on the desktop, you can use this functionality to just play around with SurrealDB, its functions, and basically just get started. We also have run selection, which is really cool. So let's say that we have a bunch of queries here, everything from artists maybe. Now we can run this entire query, and we would need to maybe scroll through it. But if we want just the artists, we can run just that selection, and we get just that query back. So maybe if we have a comparison, it's a very easy comparison here. We can run the selection, and we get the result back for the query. It's a really nice feature, and I'll probably be using it quite often. We also have infer variables. So let's say we want to select everything from artist, where city is city. Now say that we have a bunch of variables in this query and we don't want to manually do this. We have this infer variables from query button here, which we can just click. And there you see, we can now add in a query or a value. We can run the query, and I may have misspelled it here. Is that correct? I think I misspelled it. Anyways, that will allow you to easily infer variables from a query and basically make the query experience even a bit easier. You can also format queries now, which is with the format query button. So you can see it will format it. Maybe the screen is a little bit big here now. So you got a tightly formatted query back. There's a search bar, which is really cool. So either by the search icon in the bottom in the sidebar, or with Command K, we get a search bar. We can let's see. You can basically search for anything here. You can connect to some of the connections that you have set up. You can open the Explorer view or maybe other views. You can explore tables. You can change settings, export or import a database, create users, go to the API docs, and you can also see here that it will also show what shortcuts are there to manage your database. So you can decrease or increase zoom in Surrealist. You can increase the editor zoom, or I believe there are maybe a couple more. These are the ones listed here at this time. You can search for certain actions, and you can also go through these with the arrow keys. So it's a really neat feature for power users. Let's say, so we also have the SurrealQL versus JSON mode. As you can see, in the new Surrealist, you get back SurrealQL instead of JSON. This is to support record IDs and other values that we have in SurrealQL, but not in JSON. However, if you do need JSON output for some reason, you can go into the settings and change it here right away to JSON. And there you can see it will change it to a JSON output. So you can see it's not a record ID, but it's rather a string record ID. Yes, I agree. The search view is really, really nice. It's actually really cool. All right, let's see. Yeah, one downside here, by the way, which Julian kindly noted down, is with JSON, we don't get 64-bit number support. You only get that with SurrealQL. And lastly, templates. So previously, maybe Julian, can you explain how previously templates sort of worked in Surrealist and how we changed it up?
Yes, of course. So you might remember that in the old version of Surrealist, we had this concept called environment. You could organize your connections in environments and define shared values in those environments. Well, it worked quite well. It was also quite difficult. It was tricky for new users, especially. So I decided to just I just removed environments completely and instead added the concept of templates. So within the settings, there's now a new template section where you can easily add a new template. You can fill in any value in here, right? So you can put in the username or the namespace database. Everything's optional. So when you create the template and you end up creating a new connection, you now have the option to initialize it with one of your templates. So this makes it very easy to use commonly used values in multiple connections. For example, you might have 30 different databases you're managing. They'll have the same credentials or the same database name or the same host name. So you can just easily put that into a template and just apply it without having to type in anything.
And there we go. We can now create a connection. And mydomain.com doesn't exist, but that's how you would create a connection from a template. And also really cool, as you may have noticed, I'm surfing a local database here right from Surrealist, which is really easy. You basically just click the surf button and you can see it starts up a database. And that the local surfing database is also automatically one of the templates available in the connection creation module. So we can do local database here, set a namespace in the database, create it, and boom, there we go. So let's see. That's it for the hidden gems. There's a lot more to explore in the new Surrealist. Unfortunately, we are starting to near the end of the stream, so maybe let's see if we have some more questions in the chat. Let's have a look. Oscar says, "Hiya, it will be great to have the option to change the view from query results from rows to columns." Yeah, I mean, Oscar, always feel free to make feature requests in GitHub, and we can work on those. Maybe Julian has any comment here.
Yeah, it's possible to add, of course. Depends on the demand for it, but in theory, it would be as simple as just rotating the query and the results. So it's definitely something worth thinking about. I'd love to see a feature suggestion on GitHub for it.
Awesome. Arman asks, is there any shortcut key available for commenting, uncommenting some query? In previous versions, I used to press Ctrl-K, Ctrl-C to comment, and Ctrl-K, Ctrl-U to uncomment some query-like VS Code. And I believe, yeah, Kai Noah already responded here with Control or Command/B, depending on if you're on Windows, Linux, or macOS. You can select any line or maybe even multiple lines, do Command/ or Control// and it will comment out that part of the query for you.
Yeah, this was missing in the original release. There's a couple things still missing from the original Monaco editor, but we added back in the commenting hotkey just in the latest release.
Let's see, Kainoa, the sidebar should have an I'm feeling lucky button that runs a random query on your database. Will it be a select, create? Who knows? Maybe even a delete. That's maybe that's a fun one for gambling. Yeah, we can definitely think about that. Maybe we can do this as an Easter egg. Always up for Easter eggs. Let's see. Maybe a bit extreme, but I have a table with 150,000 rows. Wow, that's a lot of data. It seems like the Explorer view takes a while loading the rows, even when limiting to 10 rows per page. What could be the reason for this? Well, it's partially the UI. I mean, front-end sort of websites UI only are performed up to a certain point, obviously. But I think that's interesting, because if you limit on the database, it should actually stop. It should not scan the entire database unless you may be adding a where class, in which case you would probably need indexes to make that query a bit more performant. Unfortunately, we don't have Emmanuel on the stream today, who is our indexing expert on this field. But I'm sure if you post your question in Discord, maybe I can direct him to you, and he can give a better answer for that. So let's see. from patch notes 1 hour ago. Yes, and actually patch notes, that leaves me to one final cool new added feature, which is release notes. So you can see, you've seen it probably all stream long. See what's new in 2.0.3, which is the latest patch release we just put out. So you can click that, and you can see there's a bunch of fixes already. And you can actually also scroll through historically and see other release notes. And if you ever want to read back on them, you can use the search palette, and you can, there we go, open version changelogs. And it will pop right back into view. All right, that leaves us to the end of our stream today. Julian, is there anything else you want to add or you want to tell?
Well, I mean, we've had a pretty nice look at Surrealist. Obviously, it took a lot of work getting to this 2.0 release. It's just been an awesome opportunity, and I'm really happy to be working at SurrealDB now.
Oh, Julian, that's so nice to hear. I'm going to dive in with one final question that we've had asked, which is any plans for a coding AI assistant? I have a feeling this may be further down the road, but any insights into that?
We don't have any plans for it right now. It is something we'll have to keep evaluating going forward.
Good answer. In the future. Well, Julian and Misha, thank you so much for a truly comprehensive deep dive into Surrealist, as well as those kind of hidden gems. It's been really amazing. And thank you to all the community for your questions. A big shout out, as you said, to the whole team at Surreal who has been involved in pushing this out. I know that it's been some long days and nights for you getting it done. And of course, to the community, please do keep contributing. This is like the Cinderella story, isn't it, of a community member who saw something that he loved, wanted to make it better, saw an opportunity, and it came through like this. We'll be sharing, so you can obviously come chat to us on Discord. Come help contribute on GitHub. We've just hit 25,000 stars, and we are really, really active and wanting to hear from you. But a final massive thank you to Julian and Misha, and we will be back for our next stream in a couple of weeks with our co-founder and CEO, Toby Morgan-Hitchcock. So we look forward to seeing you then. Good night, and thank you. Bye, Misha.
Have a
Julian,
good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.